All right, so it's exactly 1 p.m. So let's get this started. Welcome everybody again to the E27 Meter Series, Meter VC webinar series. We started the E27 Meter VC series to facilitate learning and development of the startup community in Southeast Asia. And this is aimed to help you to know more about the VCs in our ecosystem, better understand how each of them look at opportunities as well as investments. So I just want to do a quick shout out to not shout out, a mention about our pro membership, right? If you want to get access to our investors network and even get deeper insight on what's happening in the region, please check out our membership program on our website. The program is designed to help you grow your startup, and we focus on investor and startup matchmaking activities. If you are a startup who is currently fundraising or looking to fundraise in the near future, the membership will be of help to get you connected with the right investors. So please check it out when you have the opportunity. Kindly note that this session will be recorded and we will be sharing the video and the article on our website after this. So let's get back to today's session. Today, I have with me Ms. Irene, partner from East Ventures. Hi, Irene. How are you?
Hello, hi Nicholas, and hi everyone.
Yeah. So if you could do just a brief introduction about yourself, and we can start with the session.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope everyone is safe and healthy despite the conditions we are at right now. It's been interesting. I'm actually based in Jakarta, and this is my first week of resuming back to office. It's a mixed feeling of like being happy and at the same time being cautious of what's happening. But nevertheless, I'm glad that everyone is getting used to this kind of format where people can still meet online and be productive. And I've heard comments where people are feeling that they're actually more productive doing it this way instead of like probably doing like an offline event where it is restricted to location. I saw some interesting names in the attendees list, and I can figure out it's probably some mix of different region of people joining, and it is really I'm really thankful people can join. So my name is Irene, so Melisa Irene, but there's a lot of Melisa, so we can go with Irene. I'm part of the East Ventures team, and I'm based in Jakarta. So I've been with the firm for 5 years plus, and what we do is technically we invest in early stage companies. The firm had started since 2009. We've been having a lot of like big beliefs in how technology can actually help to accelerate a lot of like economic and social developments for society and for the country. We've invested with, I think so far around 170 plus companies across the region, and predominantly actually regions is actually in Indonesia. So moving forward, I think a lot of questions relies on, are we going to invest despite the pandemic? We are going to still believe in our vision on investing in entrepreneurs. So I'm really glad to be able to meet everyone here.
All right, thanks for sharing. Thanks for the brief introduction. Many exciting things happening for East Ventures. So let's get to know you better, right? So I think for the first question we have for you, Irene, is about East Ventures, right? What is East Ventures investment policy? And perhaps you can share a little bit on specific criterion, startup team, the product, or the market. Yeah.
Yeah, the firm started in 2009, right? So 2009 probably is the year where digital adoption is technically at its primary phase. What the founding partners believed in was actually to foster the growth of the digital, we kind of like just say like digital ecosystem, is the fact that we need many of the entrepreneurs to come back to their home country and then start something. So from that philosophy, the thinking has been, okay, we have to invest in like the early founders. And that makes the firm philosophy is always to invest in early stage companies. So typically it's a very interesting stories would be like probably the team, probably just like 1 or 2 people having a very big vision of what they think can change the whole industries. And it's still happening today as well, where it probably just like a minimum viable product where we come and invest in the companies. So early stage is very important. It's where we felt that we are able to help the companies and the founders for their product market fit. And the very important part of what differentiates it is actually our belief system for natural entrepreneurship. So we felt that entrepreneurship is not something that is actually just created because someone wants to raise money. So entrepreneurship should be something that some people that have already thought about it for long, and the tipping point where they decide on starting a company is actually already an accumulation of a lot of thoughts and life experiences they have in the past. And when the decisions for starting the company is already a decision, despite them getting or not getting investors, is already there in the first place. So I guess that's like I think one of the big philosophy that still remains relevant since 2009 until today.
Yeah. Okay. East Ventures recently launched a new fund. I think we all know that. It was a big news, right? Perhaps you want to share a little bit on that?
Yeah. Since the firm has been since 2009, there's like multiple funds have already been raised. The very recent one that we would like to call it like the fund that is raised from home. So because of fundraising processes, we are all like working remotely from home. It's an 88 million fund for a very simple reason. It's our eighth fund. It is our 11th year. So it's kind of like fun to like multiply 8 by 11 comes at the number of 88.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, we reached the first closing, and probably those are where people can access the news. It's a 57 million fund size. And I think the thesis and the philosophy remains the same. Although if there's one thing that COVID actually teach us and something that we would like to adopt in future is on how it is the importance of emphasis for pandemic-proof kind of business model. We always talk about it. The philosophy we believe is the vitamin versus painkiller kind of philosophy. But it's just making the pandemic make it very clear. So some services that is really like painkiller, meaning that there is a strong needs on why people are going forward with that needs versus like the vitamins, it is nice to have. So the crisis makes it clear. So with the business model that is actually like vitamin, like nice to have, with the reducing spending power of people and on how there's a huge change of habits, people start to think more about like what is essentials for them. So this one is what I think for the new fund, right? Like we will definitely still go for like agnostic sector. That has been the principles of the fund anyway. But I think that I foresee there's going to be a much better quality of like deal flow and entrepreneurs, given the pandemic serves us as a much clear ground for seeing like what models actually going to survive.
Okay. So could you share a little bit more on some of the specific sectors or industries that typically East Ventures would invest in, and perhaps the stages of the company?
Stages is the simplest, straightforward one, which is early stage. Industry is an interesting fact. We were trying to see if there is actually, if there is indeed like a specific industries to invest, but no, I think agnostic will still be the way. But if there is one thing to be learned, and I guess like while we haven't really like specified what it is, some trends that we do observe and I'd like to share with everyone is on how we see that there is like a winning and losing sectors because of the pandemic, right? You see on how like some of the industries like travel, hospitality, like retail, lending, automotive is the industry that sort of like receive like bad impact from the pandemic. On the contrary side, like we see like some business model like groceries, supply chain, e-commerce, or even to the extent like social commerce are enjoying some of the benefits of this. And there are some people in between, like where you look at healthcare, education, tech, for example, where you kind of like cannot really monetize from these situations, but you sort of like get the benefit of exposure of on how it's much easier to onboard people to the platform. So I guess it's kind of like give like a much clearer flavor of like what the industry could be in the future because of this, and there's going to be a change in the behavior. I think from the industry perspective, these industries will eventually, some which is negatively impacted, it will recover anyway in the future. So it's just a question of how long it will take and what does it take for these industries to for a faster recovery. So with that uncertainty and ambiguity on the back of our mind, I think we're going still go for like a agnostic kind of approach for industries.
Okay. Is there any, like, given the current recovery, right? Is there any, I know it's agnostic, but is this ventures looking at a particular sectors that could be high potential in the new norm?
I think we currently still pretty open, and the
Okay.
fact, the interesting fact is that we do still make new investments during this time. The I think what structural changes it will take like across all industries is on our view on how we govern the company and on how the financial prudence becomes a very important factor for a lot of companies, right? Like in a previous time and where everyone could feel it too. There's sort of like kind of like bubble situations where you see and how valuations started to get quite high, where people would consider that it's not as hard as it was like maybe 5 years ago to raise funds. Is because the available capital of the market has increased, where you're seeing a lot of like fund managers starting to popping out in the market, which is for definitely for a good reasons, and people can start companies and then can try and test whether their business model works or not. But at the consequence of that was there's like a kind of like blown for valuations, where kind of like it's very hard to tell whether whether that sector is really potentially growing that high, or is it because just the available capital in the market is that big that gives the justifications for the ask valuation. So I think what pops the bubble was to go back to the fundamental of what makes a company solid, and to make people like, it's a wake up call for many people, including ourselves as well, of like, at the end, the prudence of the company is very important. So as long as there is prudency over there, and you are able to see that the sector is actually growing, I think that we are able to say that every sector will have their own opportunity. In this context, what can be seen quite clear is probably people can see it clearly, like sectors like healthcare, for example, where, like I said, like it becomes much easier to onboard new users. People who usually don't consume health-related content, they suddenly just have to, because they need to know like what situations we are facing right now. Media, for example, people who don't usually read news, they are forced to read news to know like what's happening, just to know like what are the traffic rules and when can they go back to the office or not. Education, like students, kind of like, I think in Indonesia, there's one period you don't have a choice. You have to study from home. Your studies from basically from all the platform that is already available. So this definitely enjoys I would say the exposure benefit of what the pandemic proves. But go down the line, I think like retail, for example, we've seen on how there is like a recovery track for that. And those who are able to retain it is those who are able to change, who are able to do like a multi-strategy platform, like they did like they go full force for their online onboarding, for example. And during this time when there's a transition period, how do you combine online and offline? So I guess that there are sectors that can be seen as clearly winning during this period, but I think all of the sectors in the future, there's just going to be a pop-up a new business model, and that's where I think there's a lot of chance for new entrepreneurs to come in.
Okay. Thanks for that insightful sharing. You mentioned earlier that East Ventures have about 100 plus investments. Could you share with us, like, perhaps this year, how many has East Ventures invested in, and is there a target that you guys are looking to invest in total?
We would like to be able to invest more, but we'll see how it depends out to be. I think on average we would invest around 40 to 60 companies per year.
Okay.
So I guess we did like around 20 this quarter, 20 last quarter. So with the new fund, probably we'll be able to at least stay at the same pace. Yeah, maybe
Oh, yeah.
40 companies and more until the end of the year.
Okay. How about the average fund size per fund, per funding for the startups?
It typically ranges like it's a very high range. I would say maybe around 100 to 700K.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Um, what are the qualities that you look for in a founder or a potential investment? I think this is very important for a lot of the audience out there, right? They want to know how East Ventures spot some or be able to work with some of these founders. Could you share that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. There's actually an article written about it, but I'm happy to share some of the gist of it. So a lot of the time it relates to the questions of what are investors looking for, and my suggestions to all the founders trying to fundraise is it is something that is very important to consider as well on when you approach the investors, like what are they prioritizing, right? And it typically differs as you talk to like more mature fund managers compared to like early stage fund managers. And people say about the people, product, potential market, kind of like 3P, and based on priorities. So for us, we used to always emphasize that the 3Ps, like with people being the most important one, second is the potential market, and the third is the product. But all along the line, we realized that the people are the single most important qualifications, and often is the hardest to spot as we have even more like more network of founders. But typically, I think while to different range of fund managers, people is very most important is because the founders are the ones that's going to run the business.
Mm.
And people will look there's a different kind of criteria, depends on what the founding partners believe in. So for us, there are three key elements that we always talk about. One is the integrity. Integrity meaning that it relates to like honesty, it relates to discipline, it relates to humility as well. So when someone says A, it should be A, it shouldn't be B or otherwise. Like a lot of people try to look good in front of the investors and not represents the real risk, concern, challenges on the business. So I would suggest not to do that. Like the belief of the business, like there's no 100% like perfect business, it's non-existence, but the ability to prove like what are opportunities behind and what are the challenges and why you think you are able to overcome that is very important. Integrity. I think some of the interesting cases that I had was like when I meet founders and they say that, okay, I know you guys because I'm a very, very good friend with a person A, which is very close to us. And then when we check with A, he would say that, oh, I don't know this person, or like I'm not so close with this person anyway. So that's like the first sign, right? So integrity is I think like it's principally like something that many people would agree is very important. Second is self-awareness. I think self-awareness, we talk about the ability for people to evaluate themselves, the ability of them to evaluate as well like the surrounding people with them. And this really talks a lot about their team members, for example. And it represents the quality of like leadership, the quality of like learning, and the quality of as well like self-reflections. It's very important is because a lot of times we invest in founder, right? It's just like one person team. And 3 months, 4 months from now, they become like 30 people kind of team or 40 people kind of team. And 1 or 2 years pass, it suddenly become like 100 people team. And what we think is that one person will never be able to carry it out that way. They have to hire people, they have to rely on their subordinates to be able to perform the visions of the company, right? So self-awareness will give them a lot of benefit if they really understand what they're really good at, and understand what they are not good at. It will help them with like hiring what kind of people that they need in their organizations. They'll be able to also think about like what kind of partners is good, and making decisions not only based on the business side of it, but also to the empathy side of it. Like at the end, we are building an organization full of people as well. So that's also very important. Uh, the third one is we call like the paradoxical traits. It's quite an interesting concept that our founding partners think about it. It's like you're seeing like two different people in one person, and it's kind of like very hard to tell and until someone really executes this quality, I'd like to think about it as like the flexibility and adaptability at the same time. So a founder usually, I think, like when we talk about natural entrepreneurship, usually founders are very egocentric and very obsessed with the ideas of their businesses. Sometimes it hinders them from listening to the advices or feedback from other people, or it can be vice versa, right? He wasn't really sure about the idea of the business, and he started to listen to a lot of people, and you start to take a lot of advice, like implementing here and there. But the middle ground for the perfection is that to know like what are the things that are most essentials and only people with like a big vision knows about it. But on the details, like the non-essential ones, this is where someone can be flexible, like the method of going through there, like listening and understanding from the people who have gone through that path and learn from their experiences will make them like a super effective person while living in their own vision. Second is that as we operate in the Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia is definitely a very interesting market, is because people or the world often refer it as a region, but it's a combination of, like many different countries, many different cultures, and many different behaviors of consumer as well. So the interesting part about it is we call also like local, the global knowledge, like what kind of businesses work, what business model, and what strategy works outside, but a very deep understanding about local execution as well on how the specific market that you are targeting, how are the consumer behaving so that those strategy can be implemented locally. And it becomes like a super interesting topic, especially during this pandemic, right? And it's very interesting when I talk to entrepreneurs and I ask like, what do you think your customers are like? And I'm always fascinated by, like people and entrepreneurs who are really able to tell me exactly what their customers are like and tell me the stories of their customers. So that depth of knowledge will help them to really think about like what kind of models would be able to work if a certain strategy they take and then they throw it to the customers before they can have a lot of predictions whether that work or that wouldn't work. And it gives like a lot of efficiency, productivity, and most often than not, it gives like a lot of knowledge to the team members or even to the investors as well.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing. Could you also share like, okay, so for how, I think for the audience, right, what was the best way to engage these ventures?
The best way, to be honest,
yeah,
can go to our website. You will see our portfolio companies, right?
yeah.
The best way is to talk to our founders, and get them to recommend you to us.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like the element of trust as well. And it's like, like if, like I put a lot of belief in our entrepreneurs. So it's like, if they recommend me to someone, and if you are able to get their recommendations, there's a much high chance that you will actually get a meeting. Because our founders act as like our kind of like filter to know like, hey, this is something that probably like EV is going to be interested in.
Okay. The next question I have is, during this pandemic, right, how is East Ventures portfolio doing? Just generically.
Yeah, I think the pandemic hits the global situations, right? Even like the even the Fortune 500 companies are hit by it as well. And the way we can look at it is because there's a structural change of behavior of the people and thus the industries. So like I said, like the knowledge I share with you guys just now on how like there's a different kind of categories that is positively, negatively, or neutrally impacted is exactly how we are seeing it right now. And the thing that we talk to the founders is that keep your cash and survive. If there is like, I think this is the only time where the message is always consistent with everybody. Like cash is king, and we have to find a way to first survive. So that's one. It doesn't mean that those sectors that are negatively impacted, meaning that they will go for failures. No, it's just that the winter is here, and to be able to survive during this winter and have just enough when the spring is back is the most important one. So with our founders, I think we convey that message to them, and like survival is the most key. And we talk about fundraising as well, on how there's a lot of like uncertainty in this climate, although I've seen so many positive signs where there is a recovery back. Yeah, but I think the silver lining would be like, make sure that your business fundamentals are strong. So it doesn't matter like whether or not the pandemic hits again or not, you always have like a multiple scenarios, like what if this happens, then this is going to be the plan. If this doesn't happen, then what plan are you going to use? And decisiveness comes like most important than ever. I think during this time, I've seen like some people decides to close the company down, for example. If that is the best way to do it, then probably a decision needs to be made. Or like some people decide that probably this is just going to be like a freeze for a moment. That's how they think the company can survive and it can recoup back when the situations recover. And that's the decisions people take. And there are people who think that they can go aggressive if there's certain market indicators or signals are activated. That's also part of the decisions that they need to take.
Okay. So aside from having a good business plan and cash in king, any, I guess, last advice you want to give to some of the startups or entrepreneurs in our audience on how to survive the new normal?
I think the part that has been, what I learned as well is the decisiveness. Okay. I think a lot of times like people get to a plan, and we plan a lot, and there's a lot of uncertainties there. So it seems like we have to do a lot of things. Number one is scenario planning, right? Having a plan A alone is not gonna work. We have to start thinking about like A, B, C, let's say. And to be able to think about like when the situation hits something and your belief and your gut feeling already think that it hits, and then you have to take certain decision. Quickly that decision needs to be made. For example, firing people, or like it's something that is very, very difficult to be done. And I think that I think that the entrepreneurs around here, the attendees, might probably have gone to this experience also before. And the thing about letting go is that it is hurting, and it's difficult, and it is stressful, not only for those who are let go, but those who are actually having to perform it as well. So the advices that we gave for a lot of people is that after we agree to the scenario, and we have to cut deep and fast, is because it is required, because after you do that, you have to get back of executing what are the next thing you need to do to be able to recover for your company, for the people that stays in your ship. So you also need like a very high level of mental energy. You need after that, after letting go of that, then you need to start rebuilding it again, because a lot of people will start to take responsibilities more than they have before that exercise has to be done. So that thing I've seen on how different scenarios planning on, like people decides fast, and then when the market recovers, the culture is already on shape. People are ready to go and like meet and make opportunities. But if people take it slow, think about like, okay, let's do A first, B first, C first, you suddenly being trapped in the situations of of that cycle that you can only do like manpower optimizations, for example, and you aren't able to actually do like business development of like other stuff, or you can't have the culture that you otherwise had you actually slim down the company further.
Okay. I think that's all we have for you. We're going to go into the Q&A from the audience. I think we have some questions. Okay, I'm going to go to the easy one first, right? So we have a question from Nitin Palande. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. So the question is, do you have a preference for B2B or B2C models in terms of startups? No, so it's agnostic. So you accept both B2B and B2C, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. The next question we have is from Lionel Negrodo. So I guess we already answered the average fundraising amount that East Ventures invests. I guess the question is, what is East Ventures investment distribution per country?
I think 75 to 80% are actually in Indonesia.
Okay.
I think we have around probably 15 in Singapore, and the rest is a mix between Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia.
Okay. And we thank you so much for that. We have a next question from Winky Lee. So this is about capital raising. So Winky is interested to hear your thoughts on what do you think about the biggest challenges for these two groups of startups, right? So one with an MVP slash customers, and the other one with customers and partnership collaboration, and improving their phase two of their app. A simple analogy would be like a shop without customers and other customers without a shop. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the challenge, it just faces different kind of challenge, but the most important one for capital raising is to meet people who agree with the vision first, right? Because I think like for product can be MVP. MVP is like minimum anyway, so there's a high probability that that product will be changed. So I do have like experience with us last time where we invested in founders who, you know, they just like, okay, they go out from consulting companies and they say that, okay, I've been working with this industries for long. I know exactly what are the requirements. So I funded these companies before they have the product, but they've already got commitment from their, you know, like brands who wanted to do that. So the way that I look at it is similar. If the company had an MVP and we think that the vision is going to be there, we're still gonna like be going around and asking people, right? Like, hey, if it is an HR software, for example, you can to do like a validation. There's a wide range of variety of things that you can do. You can talk to the people who are your potential customers, get their feedback, see whether there's an intention to use that product if you are building it. So you've already built your case anyway. With the second case is that when you have even if you have MVP, but you talk to the companies and founders and they say that even if you have MVP, but people don't want to use the product anyway. So it's kind of like going to be very difficult. But for like B2B, I think the silver lining would be a very depth understanding about the essence of the industry is very important. It's because that knowledge will give you like, how are you going to build your product in the way that that target customer is going to be used is where it's super important. It's not about the features. It's not about like how they will use it, but what are the problems that these customers are facing that is unaddressed by all the existing products that you have, and why I think if we talk about like a certain product in a certain industry, why is building that will be a scalable model. I've met people who build and they say, hey, I met these customers and they have this problem, and that's why I'm going to build product that directs the problem of these customers. But he ended up not being able to meet a lot of companies that face the similar kind of problem. So then the market, once you have that product out, you can serve only a very limited of number of customers. So the question becomes, is it worth the time anyway to build a company just for that, or better just do a consulting or just do like a software service companies. So that I think that for B2B or the question, the either MVP, not MVP, not very important. The most important one is the really like the understanding of like a problem solution mismatch now, and whether their market is scalable.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Kennedy Tandiari, right? So Kenny Tandiari. So this question is, what are the boundaries for startups to pivot their business in order to survive the pandemic? Are there any boundaries? Are there any limitations to that from a VC's point of view?
Yeah. I think this is it's easier said than done. And I think like I give a lot of respect for entrepreneurs facing this situation. But one thing to logically think about it, right? Like one analogy we like to use is that why you built your company at the first place. Let's say your company is, I'm just going to take a very simple analogy. Let's say you are a fashion designer for a very high-end product, like bridal or whatever. So definitely your industry is gone by now, right? So then the question is that you look at, people started to sell vegetables. So you start to think like, okay, whether or not you want to pivot to selling vegetable, but that's not your core skills, and that's not what you stand for. But as a designer, can you go further back? Like, what are the essence of fashion designer? So it can be like, oh, it's a design and producing something related to clothes. And you look at the market, oh, now a lot of people are using face masks, for example. So maybe the potential way is to pivot is to not lose the core, to think about what is really the basic essence of what you are doing, and to try to like pivot it to the current situation. So that would be the most ideal way to think about it, is because you're still doing the things that you are at the core, what you are really good at, or like why the company stands for, although the kind of like product that you produce might be different. But I can understand, like, it's not it's really like easier said than done. But the matter of fact is that we have seen on how people do different kind of things. I think from our company innovations, for example, we invest in the coffee company like Fore Coffee. During this time, people don't go out and they start to stay at home, and then your home suddenly have like 3 or 4 people, and they launch a product called the ready to drink, like a 1-liter bottle of coffee, because that suits the needs. There's a change of behavior. So you quickly launch a product, but they didn't suddenly go and sell vegetable, for example. So it still stays like what you are really good at and why the company exists at day one. And think about the behavior. Is it a channel that you have to change? Is it the way the product that you have to change? Is it the distributions that need to change? Is the way you reach the customers need to change? So really identifying that would be helpful.
Okay. I guess the next question we have a lot of questions coming in. I guess the next question would be from Amy Lam. So I think this is interesting too, right? What's the advice to startups that have already been struggling during COVID and have burned all their cash on hand, right? Should they try to push for another fundraising or freeze the operation for a while, or even shut down and let go? What's East Venture's take on that?
I think while there is no like I don't think there is like a one answer that fits all condition. But one thing is to say that if the situations are not, if you try to put yourself in the investor's shoes, right? If the situations are not quite good yet, and the cash is low and you need to survive, I think logically it's just very difficult to convince a new person to give you money for that. The way that I probably think, if you already have like an existing investors, the first survival approach is to definitely talk to your existing shareholders. Can be yourself, can be part of like the angels that you have raised from your funds before, it can be like the internal, your internal shareholders. So these are the people who actually already know you, and these people already know like how you operate, and also there is no need to establish that level of trust further. But if let's say that options is ended and sorted out, but and you don't see like there is a signs of recovery coming out, then you have to start to look at the cost structure and to ask yourself as well, like whether you think there is just going to be a recovery or not. If you think there's going to be a recovery, and how long do you think like no income or like no conditions is going to be, then there probably you need to optimize during that time. Either like to reduce the cost of operations. I think some of the framework that I've seen go to the extreme extent of like staying just the founders only, is because there is no, let's say like, I think some of the companies that I've met were like, basically all the customers are gone. So if all the customers are gone, like it's just really waiting for that recovery to come back. If you still believe in that businesses, it can stay dormant for a while. Or if you are able to find like other opportunities, I think like some people I've seen also from changing from like a product into a service for temporarily, just to make sure that they're able to survive and get cash cow to fund that operations, is another option as well.
Okay.
So please don't take it as you still need to consult your situations with people that you can trust.
Okay, and then the next question, I think we got time for a couple, like 2 or 3 more questions. So I got the next question from Anissa. So it's 2 parts, right? The first part is, do you think the pandemic will affect exit for startups? And the second part of the question is, as investors are becoming more careful, right? Do you think we'll see more growth stage investments in the final semester of 2020?
Exits, I think that the way I think about it is that, like exits doesn't suddenly come as like, okay, I want to sell a company and you see it's sold next month. Exit is a long discussion that people take like maybe 6 to 12 months, or some exit case probably a years taken for them to go that. I think the pandemic had like a consistent structural impact to where people become much more careful in the way that assess things, and the clarity actually brings about different kind of dynamics. So some ways, if you think about it, like if this pandemic gives like a clarity not only for the bad thing but also for the good stuff, right? Like if you really think that okay, the strategy going forward is digital, so some people, or like we talk about conglomerate for example, really think that maybe the digitization is 4.0 is something they've been delaying and they really have to quickly do it. It can accelerate that process as well, or it can delay for some industries that people think are going to give a pandemic. I think time frame wise, probably there's going to probably be less of it, is because people need to consider more and need more time to assess what are the implications and the quick recovery for that. There's going to be impact, I think, to that. But it's not only exit, but it's all across. But for us, like I think people read in the news as well, we did exit Mocha POS to Gojek. We've invested companies since 2014. So I think like fundamentally like good companies, or like I really believe in like vitamin painkiller kind of like philosophy. So as long as some companies are really, you can see like what is the core of your operations and why is that pandemic proof anyway, or are there strategies to make it pandemic proof, then it's like the strong fundamentals to build. As a matter of fact, we are able to exit that actually. I think the news came in early June, end April, early June. Second, whether there is going to be a more growth stage companies, I think it will be fair. As the movement start to get, there's part of recovery for it. I think there's going to be across all places, growth is going to increase, but also on the early stage is because it presents a new opportunities for different and new business model.
Okay, so I'm muting myself because someone's outside washing the ground. It's kind of noisy. I guess it's time for one last question. I think this is interesting as well. Should startups look at merging with similar companies? Is M&A a good option at this time?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Should startups look at merging with similar companies? Is M&A a good option at this time?
Case per case basis as well. You need to actually try to look at the trade-offs, and we talk about trade-off a lot. It's because there is no yes or no depending on your situation, right? So let's say if you are in the industry that is actually already very highly impacted and the outlook for the recovery is going to be long, and to stay there alone is and it's always like economics is the function of supply and demand, right? If you have a lot of players, it only makes sense when there's a big pool of demand aiming for that. So that's why there is a variety of it. But if you see that the demand is actually shrinking, and it came to the fact that, okay, you actually don't need that much of a supply, and that's where I think economically why merging makes sense. And I think during this time, airline industry talk about this a lot. It's because you won't have so much demand for it already. Why do you need so much providers? But to think about it as well is you're seeing on like some new in a certain industries as new players coming out. It's because suddenly certain pool of demand get increased and you don't have enough supply to fulfill that level of demand. So to that questions, it's really depend on like number one, the industry condition and that law of like supply and demand. Very important to assess whether it is. Second is actually your own condition, right? Like let's say you are in the good phase, good industry and all, but you have to look at your internal condition as well. Can you survive being alone? what is the benefit and the trade-off of like staying alone, for example, versus actually starting to talk. And M&A is a process that's actually quite long and painful, and it's like a marriage, right, where you combine like two different kind of, if it is a big company, it's even more painful, like combine two different cultures, sets of operations all together. So it's usually a long process. So I would say that exploration is, during this time, people need to open their horizon to be open for many different possibilities.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for Q&A. Thank you everybody for submitting your questions. If you guys have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Ace Ventures or Irene at the same time. And I just want to extend a warm thank you to Irene. Much thank you for this highly engaging session. So I just want to mention again, we E27, we have over 250 investors like Ace Ventures who is looking for connection with early stage tech startups, ranging from pre-seeds to Series B rounds, right? So please feel free to check out our membership program and feel free to contact with us to know more. Next week, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit on the slides, but next week, sorry, we do that. We are going to have another Meet the VC series webinar with TNB Aura. It's on July 23rd, 2 to 3 p.m. So please feel free to join. And also feel free to connect with us, right? E27, our Telegram group, our Facebook, and our Instagram. These are the handles. Feel free to reach out to us. Again, the videos will be uploaded on our YouTube channels. The video will be available on Facebook Live, and we'll be doing an article with Ace Ventures as well. So please feel free to reach out to Ace Ventures for any questions if you want to reach out to them. And yeah, thank you everybody so much for your participation, your questions, and your time. We really appreciate it. We'll be sending out a follow-up email to get more of your inputs on what kind of content or maybe which VCs you'd like us to chat with, to know more about them. And we hope to hear back from all of you guys. So take care, everybody. Stay safe, and see you guys soon.